in a way, this is at the top of the news, and in a way, it's not. But I think it's a really, actually, a very important topic, even though some people think, oh, yeah, pot, you know. I'd like to talk about marijuana, and specifically medical marijuana, and specifically in that context, there's something called CBD, which I think is pronounced cannabidiol. And so, you know, if you know, feel free to call and correct me. This is not something that you know. I've known about THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, since I was a teenager, but the CBD in pot, or in cannabis sativa and indica sativa, or cannabis indica, I guess is what it is. I find this whole thing fascinating. I told you the story of when Louise and I went to Portland last Thanksgiving to spend with our kids. All three of our kids live in Portland. One of them actually lives in Washington State, in Vancouver, and we were staying with him. And pot is legal there, and so Louise and I went to a pot store. I'd say, hey, we'd never been to a legal pot store. I mean, whoever would have known? And we used to smoke pot when we were teenagers, but, you know, we throughout our adult lives, we raised 3 kids. We've started 5 businesses, really successful businesses. I mean, we've started 7. One went down in flames. One kind of didn't go anywhere. But, you know, we've been working our butts off most of our lives, and so we've not been sitting around smoking dope. But it was like, oh, this would be interesting. And I tried it, you know, a month or so ago when I was in Denver, too, tried smoking the legal pot there. But I told you about that experience. The guy who had bought it the day before, because the pot stores closed at 7 in Denver, and I was there for a board meeting, and I couldn't get out before that. So the guy who bought it, he had one brand. He says, this is the high THC, and the other one is the high CBD. And he said, so well, let's try that. And we smoked both of them. And I ended up like, just wow, I am pretty stoned here. And I need to go to sleep. And so I went up and I slept really, really well in my hotel room that night. And the next day flew home from Denver. When we went to Washington State in the legal pot store, now, you know, Louise has had and we believe has successfully treated breast cancer. I went through this thing with prostate cancer. It's all solved. But it's like this whole thing about cancer and CBD is fascinating. And in fact, here, this is a press release from PR Newswire. Press release. From a company, right? That's like just telling the world. This is from 2012. It's on the PR Newswire. San Diego, September 21, 2012. The headline, Can cannabidiol, CBD, fight metastatic cancer? According to the latest research, the answer is yes. Now, this is a press release from a company called Medical Marijuana, Inc., and they're traded over the counter. MJNA is the symbol. And they say scientists at California Pacific Medical Center have been researching marijuana's compounds for the past 20 years, have found that cannabidiol, or CBD, has the ability to turn off the DNA that causes breast and other types of cancers to metastasize. It's the second most abundant cannabinoid in marijuana, but it does not cause the psychotropic high of THC. And then Pierre Desprez, one of the scientists, who, by the way, his current funding is coming from the National Institute of Health, the Susan G. Komen for the Cure, the U.S. Department of Defense, and the California Breast Cancer Research Program. And he says, we started by researching breast cancer, but now we found that cannabidiol CBD works with many kinds of aggressive cancers, brain, prostate, any kind in which these high levels of ID1 are present. ID1 being an enzyme or a protein that promotes metastasis of cancers. So CBD in pot does not get you high. And in fact, one of the things I've noticed for years, I'm sitting here with a can of, or a box, I guess it is, of Pacific brand all-natural hemp, non-dairy beverage. And there's a couple different brands that I've used over the years. And I use it as coffee creamer, and I have about 4 tablespoons of oatmeal in the morning, and I put hemp milk on it. And what I've noticed is that when I take the hemp milk, I don't want to say I feel better, like smiling, because actually coffee does that to me. Coffee makes me chatty and, speed, right? But I have had pain in my back since I was 20 years old and broke my back skydiving. And that pain goes away. So I'm wondering, is there CBD in hemp milk? Because CBD is not the stuff that gets you high. And as I'm drinking my hemp milk here. So am I doing the show high? Or at least with CBD? I don't know, but I find it fascinating. And the hemp actually has high in the fiber hemp. This is an article from the Schaefer Library of Drug Policy, druglibrary.net. It says cannabidiol, CBD, cannabidiol, a precursor chemical in the biosynthetic pathway of cannabis sativa, tends to exist in an inverse relationship with THC. In hemp fiber, where THC levels are very low, CBD levels are high. So, they breed pot with high THC to get people high. They breed pot with high CBD to relieve pain and stop cancer. And I'm looking forward to going back to Vancouver, Washington next week for Christmas. And I had to leave my pot there, right? Because it's not legal to fly with this stuff. But we got this really high CBD pot, Louise and I, and we smoked it before we went to bed because we don't like being high during the day. And just slept like babies. And Louise has a neuropathy. She's got a pain problem that's associated with her chemo, the consequences of it. And it seemed to help dramatically with that. So I'm convinced this stuff is healthy. Now, the omnibus bill that just passed Congress says that the federal government cannot use money to interfere with states' medical marijuana programs. I think we're on the verge of a huge renaissance about this. There are over 60 known compounds in cannabis, in cannabis that are cannabinoids, that are in this family of things. Here's another. This is a completely separate research study published over at livescience.com. Pot smokers show less inflammation. And they're talking about C-reactive protein. This is a protein you can measure in the blood that as it goes up, your risk of heart attack goes up because it's a marker of inflammation. And inflammation causes hardening of the arteries or thickening of the arteries, and that causes heart disease. And they had these people into 3 groups: people who had never smoked pot, people who occasionally smoked pot, people who had smoked pot at least once in the past 30 days. The researchers found that the people who had smoked in the last month had the lowest CRP levels, had lower CRP levels than those who had never smoked the drug. Pot prevents heart disease?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And then the inflammation is also associated with cancer. I mean, this is how the uterine cancer and throat cancer from the herpes virus are caused.